For more than 12 years, a quiet chasm has grown between one of Hollywood's most iconic fathers and the daughter who once shared his spotlight. But now, that long silence has been shattered, revealing a truth far more poignant than any script could have written. Suri Noelle, the girl once known to the world as Suri Cruise, was born into the blinding glare of a spotlight she never chose, her childhood shrouded in a carefully constructed secrecy. She was separated from her father by currents far too deep for a young girl to navigate, but today, at 19 years old, she is making a statement not with words, but with her actions, and that silent declaration has sent shockwaves through all who recall the image of a flawless family. The family that once graced the red carpets with seemingly perfect smiles. This is the untold story of a daughter who came of age watching her own father from afar, and the celebrated man who, in turn, watched her fade from his world. It was a dream that began, fittingly, like a scene from a blockbuster film when Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes first met. The year was 2005. It was a romance that captivated the world before the first chapter was even written. Katie, at 26, was America's sweetheart, still radiating the afterglow of her Times Dawson's Creek Times fame. She was a rising star, carrying the earnest charm of a small-town dreamer. Tom, at 43, was more than an actor. He was an institution Times, Top Gun asterisk, Jerry Maguire asterisk Mission, Impossible asterisk. He was the kind of star whose name alone was a guarantee of box office gold. And for Katie, this was more than simple admiration. It was a long-held dream, confessed years earlier to the pages of Time's 17 Times magazine. She admitted her ultimate fantasy was to one day marry Tom Cruise, a seemingly innocent, girlish wish at the time. A fantasy no one believed could ever manifest into reality. But when Tom first laid eyes on her, he allegedly made a quiet pronouncement to his inner circle, "I'm going to marry her." And in a matter of weeks, the impossible became inevitable. Their connection was electric, the romance, a supernova in the Hollywood sky. On the ancient streets of Rome, they were captured holding hands, their laughter echoing like that of teenagers, their affection too potent to conceal. The world looked on, mesmerized, as the famously composed and private Tom Cruise seemingly unraveled into a man utterly consumed by passion. And then came the moment that would define it all, his now legendary appearance on Time's The Oprah Winfrey Show asterisk. He leaped onto her couch, arms outstretched, proclaiming to the world, "I'm in love." It was a display that was bizarre, unforgettable, and quintessentially Tom Cruise. For some, it was the ultimate romantic gesture. For others, it was deeply unsettling. But for everyone, it was impossible to turn away. Then, on April 18, 2006, their daughter Suri entered the world, the living embodiment of their whirlwind romance. Tom would later call her birth the happiest day of my life. He spoke of her endlessly, referring to his daughter as nothing short of a miracle. Yet, even this miracle was born into a world shaped by the powerful beliefs that governed his life, the Church of Scientology. Katie, the girl from Toledo who had grown up in the quiet pews of Catholic school, now found herself navigating an entirely different universe. Both her pregnancy and Suri's birth were to follow the strict customs of Scientology, including the mandate of a silent birth, a ritual where not a single word could be uttered in the delivery room. Tom reportedly went so far as to purchase his own sonogram machine to monitor the pregnancy personally. To the outside world, these were peculiar details, perhaps even controlling, but in Tom's world, it was an act of pure devotion. Their wedding that November was the kind of spectacle that fuels tabloid headlines and storybook fantasies. It was held within the ancient walls of the 15th century Odescalchi Castle in Bracciano, Italy, an affair costing more than $3 million. Katie was a vision in Giorgio Armani. Tom radiated a palpable pride. The guest list was a constellation of stars: Jennifer Lopez, Will Smith, the Beckhams, but behind the perfect smiles, a quiet worry was taking root in Katie's parents. As devout Catholics, they felt a deep unease about the powerful institution that now enveloped their daughter's world. And their fears, it would turn out, were not unfounded. The storybook romance slowly transformed into something else entirely, a life governed by a rigid belief system, shrouded in secrecy, and defined by an immense power. In Tom's eyes, it was love. For Katie, it was the dawn of a profound isolation, and for their daughter, Suri, it was the beginning of a life that was destined to be anything but ordinary. The perfect family begins to fracture. By the year 2007, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes appeared to be an untouchable force in Hollywood. They were the very image of a Hollywood fantasy, captured in the blinding flash of cameras on 1,000 red carpets, a life of private jets and glossy magazine covers. To the world, they were the perfect portrait, Hollywood's most bankable star, his luminous wife, and their cherubic daughter. But behind the gilded facade, the flawless image was beginning to crack. A subtle, yet chilling observation began to circulate among friends. Katie was never truly alone. Every outing, no matter how casual, was chaperoned. Figures from Tom's inner circle, many with deep ties to Scientology, were constant, silent companions. She moved through her life under the gaze of quiet, watchful figures, their presence a constant reminder that every word, every gesture, was being noted. One evening, over the low hum of a high-end restaurant, journalist Maureen Orth witnessed a flicker of the truth, a subtle unease that surfaced when adoring fans approached their table. Katie offered a polite, practiced smile, but then uttered a phrase so simple, yet so chilling, it stopped Orth cold. "Oh, we don't go outside very much." An innocent remark, perhaps, but to those who understood the rigid architecture of Scientology, it was a confession, a glimpse into a gilded cage. Tom, meanwhile, remained a force of nature, a whirlwind of charisma and unshakable confidence, his devotion to his faith absolute. He had ascended to become one of Scientology's most powerful ambassadors, a champion for its celebrity centers, and a fierce defender against any and all critics. For Tom, the church was more than a religion. It was the ultimate truth, a path to salvation. For Katie, it was becoming a wall, a boundary she was forbidden to cross. From the outside, her parents, Martin and Kathleen Holmes, devout Catholics themselves, watched with a growing sense of alarm. They had long been wary of the organization's secretive nature, and now that wariness turned to fear. Their visits grew infrequent, the distance between them and their daughter becoming an impassable gulf. Friends whispered that Katie had become distant, almost hollow. Her conversations were peppered with the same rehearsed praises for Tom. "He's amazing, he's wonderful," she would repeat, the words feeling scripted, memorized. The spark that once defined her was dimming. In stark contrast, Tom's two adopted children with Nicole Kidman, Bella and Connor, were already devout followers, their lives woven deeply into the fabric of the church. In Tom's world, it was a foregone conclusion that their daughter, Suri, would follow the same path. But Katie recoiled at the thought of surrendering her child to a system she had come to fear. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she began to create distance. By the year 2010, whispers in Hollywood grew louder, rumors that Katie Holmes felt utterly trapped. Her absence at church events was noted. She began quietly reconnecting with old friends, spending more and more time in New York City, away from the California sun and Tom's watchful eye. Beneath the surface, a quiet rebellion was taking shape. She was gathering intelligence, laying the groundwork for something monumental. By 2011, the fractures in the facade were too deep to conceal. Her public smiles became brittle, her movements guarded. The world, which had once swooned over a fairy tale romance, now saw something else in her eyes: fear. And as she clutched her daughter's hand, a silent promise in her grip, a plan was solidifying in her mind, an escape that would not just end a marriage, but shatter an illusion. The date was June 29, 2012. The day the illusion of Hollywood's perfect family would be brought to an end. The headlines hit like a thunderclap, a shockwave that reverberated from coast to coast. Katie Holmes had filed for divorce from Tom Cruise. The timing was not accidental. It was a cold, calculated strike. It came just days before his landmark 50th birthday. This wasn't merely a separation. This was a rescue mission. Even Tom Cruise, a man of immense control, would later admit he was blindsided. "I didn't expect it," he confessed, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Life has a way of doing that to you." But this was no impulsive decision. For months, Katie had been operating in the shadows, moving with the meticulous precision of an operative who knew her every move was being monitored. She procured disposable cell phones. She hired a new security detail, loyal only to her. Staff members suspected of being informants for Scientology were quietly replaced. Every phone call, every trip to the store, was a carefully orchestrated maneuver. And in her corner stood her father, Martin Holmes, an attorney renowned for his formidable legal mind. He was the silent architect of her escape. The very prenuptial agreement he had helped draft years before would now become the key to unlocking his daughter's freedom. In a brilliant strategic maneuver, Katie chose New York as the battleground, not California, knowing the city's laws were a shield for the parent seeking sole custody. The papers were filed in absolute secrecy, while Tom was a world away, filming on the stark landscapes of Iceland. He would discover his marriage was over the same way the rest of us did, through the cold, stark glare of a headline. For a man who meticulously architected every facet of his existence, it was the ultimate public unraveling. Court documents would later unseal Katie's singular, powerful motive: protection. She demanded full custody of 6-year-old Suri and unwavering authority over her education, her health, and most critically, her spiritual path. Her fear, it turned out, wasn't of the man she married, but of the institution that had enveloped their lives. Whispers from former members later alleged that Katie lived in fear that Suri might one day be conscripted into the organization's notorious Sea Org, a future she refused to even contemplate. The legal war concluded almost as swiftly as it began. In a stunning 11 days, the divorce was sealed. Tom consented to pay $400,000 a year in child support, a sum designated to cover all of Suri's needs until the age of 18, along with the escalating costs of health insurance and education. But this was never about the money. What she sought was something far more precious: a firewall, legal, physical, and spiritual. The day after the ink dried on the settlement, she and Suri simply vanished from the Los Angeles grid. They resurfaced in the concrete canyons of New York City, where the paparazzi lens finally found them, walking hand in hand through the streets of Chelsea. The entourage was gone. The security detail, the carefully orchestrated photo ops, all of it erased. Katie looked exhausted, but for the first time in a long time, she looked free. She offered a smile, a real one, that reached her eyes. For Suri, however, freedom arrived, cloaked in silence. The father who had once held her aloft on 1,000 red carpets, the man who called her his miracle, had simply disappeared from her life. Not with a bang, not with a bitter fight, but with a deafening quiet. And in that silence, a new story began to write itself, one that no Hollywood studio or spiritual organization could ever control. The missing years. In the aftermath, two worlds that were once one split into separate orbits. In 2013, during a rare deposition for an unrelated lawsuit, a lawyer posed the question directly: had Katie left to protect Suri from Scientology? Tom, under oath, visibly bristled at the inquiry, calling the suggestion offensive, before conceding it was indeed one of the assertions. It was the closest the world would ever get to a confession, a fleeting acknowledgement of the Great Divide. That same year, reports surfaced that Tom had seen his daughter only once since the split, in a brief, clandestine meeting. After that, a void. No photographs, no credible sightings, no visits. In the years that followed, Tom poured himself into his work, a blur of mission, impossible sequels, Top Gun revivals, global press tours, and death-defying stunts. With every cliff he scaled and every plane he clung to, the world cheered his audacity, oblivious that somewhere, an ocean away, his youngest child was navigating her own world without him. Meanwhile, Katie dedicated herself to the quiet, radical act of building a normal life. She enrolled Suri in a private Manhattan school, filling her days with trips to the park, local cafes, and dance lessons. Those in their small circle observed a young girl who was bright, compassionate, and remarkably centered for a child forged in the crucible of fame. Katie became her shield, deflecting the harsh glare of the spotlight. There would be no more red carpets, no probing interviews, no Hollywood chaos. As she blossomed into her teenage years, Suri became her mother's reflection. The same searching eyes, the same gentle, hesitant smile, the same quiet streak of independence. But a single topic remained a closed door. Whenever her father's name was mentioned, a polite, impenetrable silence would fall. Publicly, Tom never uttered her name again. Privately, sources claimed the financial support continued, a silent wire transferring funds for tuition and medical bills. Yet for more than a decade, not a single photograph of them together would ever surface. The man who could hold the entire world's attention, seemingly unable to hold his own daughter's. He could find no map back into his daughter's world. It was as if two celestial bodies, once in perfect alignment, had drifted into opposing ends of the cosmos. A new name, a new life. By 2021, in the quiet shadows of a global spotlight, Suri was forging her own path. She was a student at New York's esteemed LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, the very same hallowed halls that inspired the cinematic legend, Fame. She explored acting, singing, and directing alongside her peers, yet it was a subtle, almost hidden decision that signaled the profoundest change of all. In the playbill for her senior year musical, The Addams Family, the cast list bore a name that was both familiar and entirely new. Not Suri Cruise, but Suri Noelle, her mother's middle name. This was no mere stage credit, it was a quiet declaration of identity. When she graduated in June of 2024, that same name was officially printed on the roster, Suri Noelle. Her father was not there. He was thousands of miles across the ocean, a face in the crowd at a Taylor Swift concert in London. The contrast was a haunting echo for fans who recalled the beaming father from 2006. Katie, however, was there in New York, a solitary figure, her applause mingling with quiet tears amidst the other parents. Her daughter had stepped into womanhood, and she had done so far from the gilded cage of Hollywood and entirely outside the orbit of her father. Later that summer, Suri enrolled at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh to pursue a degree in fashion. It was Katie who helped her move into the dorm, carrying boxes herself, just like any other mother. There were no cameras, no entourage, only a profoundly normal moment between a mother and her daughter. That fall, Katie stepped behind the camera to direct a new film, Happy Hours, a project that reunited her with an old colleague from her Dawson's Creek era, Joshua Jackson. During the filming in 2025, a visitor appeared on set. Now 19, Suri moved with a quiet, self-assured grace, dressed simply in khaki pants, a white tank top, and red sneakers, carrying a calm confidence that had clearly been shaped by years of silence. The world barely recognized the young woman she'd become, but her statement was unmistakable. She was no longer simply Tom Cruise's daughter. She was Suri Noelle, and she was, at long last, free. But behind the headlines of freedom lies a story of heartbreak. In October of 2025, a photograph surfaced. Suri in New York, sitting on a doorstep, her head buried in her hands, looking utterly exhausted and lost in thought. Moments later, an Uber pulled to the curb. Katie emerged, sat down beside her, and offered a silent, gentle comfort. The two spoke in hushed tones before walking off together in search of pastries. To a stranger, it was an ordinary slice of city life, a mother consoling her daughter. But for those who had followed their journey, it was a poignant symbol of the fortress they had built around each other since the day their universe was fractured. Suri is now 19, a college sophomore studying fashion, writing music, and discovering the person she was always meant to be. Her relationship with her father remains a silent, empty space. He fulfills his financial obligations, but they have not spoken publicly or been photographed in the same frame in 12 years. Meanwhile, Tom continues to reach for the stars, both professionally and literally, preparing for a film shoot in outer space in collaboration with NASA and SpaceX. The man who reached the zenith of Hollywood now intends to transcend the Earth itself. And yet, the immeasurable distance between him and his youngest daughter may be the one gulf he can never bridge. Sources close to the family say Katie has consciously steered away from bitterness, focusing instead on gratitude and growth. She calls Suri an incredible person and says her greatest source of pride is witnessing her daughter's profound strength and independence. And yet, even in her newly claimed identity, Suri carries the weight of a narrative that isn't hers alone, a story of love, of control, and of the quiet, inescapable cost of fame. For 19 years, this very private story has played out on a public stage, a cinematic tale whose final scene remains unwritten. A father, a titan of the silver screen whose performances are etched into our collective memory, and a daughter who made the quiet, resolute choice to find her own light, far from his colossal shadow. Now, as Suri Noelle meticulously constructs a life on her own terms, a single question hangs in the balance, suspended in the silence between them. Will the final chapter see a reunion, or has the gulf between them become a permanent feature of their landscape? It forces us to ask, can time truly heal the fractures carved by silence, or are some chasms, born of history and heartache, simply impossible to cross? We leave that question with you. Share your reflections in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe, and ring the notification bell for more explorations into the shadows where family, fortune, and fame collide.